And if the technologies are democratized, for better or worse, in some ways, the law is going to be democratized. And again, for better or worse, because it's going to mean that people are relying on some of these tools to their detriment. And if we as lawyers have an obligation to ensure, the rule of law, that the legal system functions the way it should, then we have an obligation to get out in front of these changes.
Welcome to Power Up Your Practice. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, a law firm owner and law practice management consultant, author, podcaster, and adjunct professor. Each week, I'm so excited to invite other guests on to be able to learn from the inspiring minds and share practical tips so that we can all work smarter, serve our clients even better, and grow our firm. But after all, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So let's power up together and continue to create the law firm and the life you deserve. Well, welcome everybody. This is Ruby Powers with Power Up Your Practice. And we have a special guest, Ray Brescia, who's the Honorable Harold R. Tytler Chair in Law and Technology at Albany Law School. And he has a recent book out as well. But we actually met at TLTF in Austin not too long ago. And it was in a session about like the future lawyer or the future of law or something along those lines. And it was a quite fascinating conversation. We were talking about there was a lot of adjuncts or professors or academia in the room, but then also investors in big law and legal tech. And so it was a fascinating discussion, and Ray came up to me and then the rest is history. Here we are. So Ray, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ruby. Thanks for having me. It was great meeting you, and I look forward to future collaborations, including this one.
Yeah, me too. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've got going on with your latest book as well.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So, I teach at Albany Law School in New York State, in the state's capital. I teach a couple of different things. Most prominently, federal civil procedure and legal ethics, and then I teach a course on nonprofit law, and a course where we do some work around technology startups. I started practice back in 1992, graduated from law school then, and started as a legal aid attorney in New York City. Did what we call legal services work, so nonprofit work, for about 14 years. Took a brief hiatus to clerk for a federal judge, and then joined the faculty at Albany Law School. I spent about 10 years before that as an adjunct professor, and we can talk all about the ups and downs of being an adjunct. But really, one of the main reasons I was able to secure a position teaching on a full-time basis was because I had been an adjunct for about a decade. So as I said, now I teach, and I also do a bit of writing. And my most recent book, which came out last week, is called Lawyer 3.0, A Guide to Next Wave Lawyering. And it sets up the framework of that I believe we're in the third iteration of the legal profession. The first was from the colonial era to the end of the 19th century. And then the second really started, Lawyer 2.0 started then, and we can dive into that. And we've basically been operating in the legal profession that was created over 120 years ago or so. And much of those changes are the product of technology and demographic changes. And I think we're facing some similar challenges, the profession is now. And I think it requires us to think about a new framework for delivering legal services, for solving people's legal problems, not necessarily for ensuring that the legal system is a full employment plan for lawyers. So that's a little bit of my bio, a little bit about the book, and I'm happy to talk about any of that stuff, or to go in completely different directions.
Oh, well, no, I'm really fascinated, and even like one of my first chapters in my book about Power Up Your Practice, it was sort of like the history of of practice of law, but I did it in like a short chapter. So like, but it was good to sort of set up like the evolution of thought. So I'm really fascinated. I mean, feel free. Let's go. We can dive into like what you're seeing and where you think we're going.
Yeah. Let's start with that history. All right.
Okay.
So when Americans think about the American legal profession, and putting, lawyer jokes aside, I know many of them, but when we generally think about the American legal profession, we think about, law firms and law schools and bar exams and bar associations, lawyer codes of ethics, all of these, institutions of the legal profession. Well, in reality, many of those didn't exist from the colonial times to the late 19th century, right? If lawyers worked in a firm, it might be, two or three lawyers working together, almost like a WeWork in 1850, right? They shared some office space.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they passed clients back and forth, but most lawyers were solo practitioners or worked with one or two other lawyers, again, sort of sharing an office, right? There were virtually no bar associations. I work at Albany Law School. It's the nation's oldest independent law school. We got started in 1851. But, there weren't a lot of law schools at the end of the 19th century, certainly not the number that we have here, and certainly not in the way we think about law schools now. Law schools, University of Virginia had a law department, Harvard had a emerging law school, but most lawyers were not educated in law schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Virtually no codes of ethics. You just go down the line, right? Something changed at the end of the 19th century, and that was, for over 100 years, we had an admissions process, if you would, that had basically two requirements. You were white and you were a man, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that started to change at the end of the 19th century. The ease of admission to practice, which was a sort of throwback to the Jacksonian era, started
Mm-hmm.
to let in, women, African Americans, immigrants, and elites in the bar said, whoa, wait a minute. This is, going to impact our monopoly on the practice of law. It's going to change the profession. It's going to make it easier for the people who generally are on the other side of the cases where we represent, a bank or a railroad company. They're going to have lawyers now. So elites in the profession started to impose things like, codes of ethics, and then educational requirements that made it more difficult and more expensive for people
Mm-hmm.
to enter the practice of law, and all of those, and on the back end, bar exams, right? So all of those forces, those institutions, were designed to preserve the lawyer monopoly and to adapt the legal profession to the needs of a rapidly growing economy, to demographic changes. We very much continue to live in the world that those elites created, during the Gilded Age and finishing up in the Roaring '20s, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe we should be rethinking some of these things. Going down the limb here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm still finishing The Future of Professions by Richard and Daniel Susskind, and just sort of like the evolution of, being sort of there. We were sort of the gatekeepers to knowledge, and that's changed. And so there's been all these disruptors in the space. And so what is now? And you're right, like there's such a latent market of the people who are not getting serviced, and like how can we help them? And I think also, like, do they even need to see a lawyer, or could some of their things be resolved without needing to see a lawyer, especially with more information sharing and more accessibility? So I agree. So where do you see this 3.0? Like what's your vision, or where are we going?
Well, you touched on a lot of great points, many of which I try to address in the book. So right now you described what Richard Susskind says. You mentioned the term the latent legal market, and maybe you coined it, but I'm familiar with Richard Susskind
No,
having said it
I
before.
didn't coin it. I've talked to lots of people. I've heard it's been said.
Yeah,
So no.
yes, it's a popular term used in this space,
Right.
and it's one thing to say, oh, there are people here and there who might need a lawyer who aren't getting one. The reality is, in the
It's
United States, 92% of low-income people face their legal problems without adequate legal representation. 50% of middle-income people face their legal problems without adequate legal representation. So we're not talking about a few people here and there. We're talking about tens of millions, if not over 100 million people, easy, right? That cannot afford attorney, don't know how to access one. If they do know how to access one, they don't know that they necessarily have a legal problem that needs solving. They may not know that they have a legal problem that a lawyer can solve. So certainly there's a significant market, and there's a significant opportunity to help people understand that when they have certain issues that might either be legal problems or could become legal problems if they don't take action soon to address them. And so, first is awareness, that someone has a legal problem. Now, it's a bit, of a challenge to say, okay, now what if we were to let everybody know that they have a problem that, that's legal in nature and that it might need a lawyer to solve? If they can't access one, it's you're sort of raising expectations that you can't satisfy. So I do think that we need to think about how to deliver services at scale, just in time, just enough that will provide people solutions to their legal problems, that will be meaningful and accessible for them, that might mean that it solves their legal problem, or it prevents something from becoming so significant that they do need a lawyer to solve their problem. And so it's a continuum of care in the legal profession, or at least it can be. And we can take a page from the medical profession, where they have different licenses for people who provide different services, the right services at the right time. And I think if it's good enough for the medical profession, where they're dealing quite literally with life and death, I would think we could try to figure it out for the legal profession as well. And it's interesting, if we go back to the history, some of the changes that the elites of the bar adopted at the turn of the 20th century, they took from the Medical Association. So the American Medical Association, at the end of the 19th, early 20th century, said, too many people are passing themselves off as medical professionals. They don't have the proper training. There are medical schools that don't, give people adequate training. And so we're going to start, the American Medical Association, we're going to start looking at medical training. We're going to professionalize it. We're going to make it serious. We're going to make it, quite literally more expensive to attend, more onerous to attend. And in a few short years, by doing that and requiring licensing of doctors and of medical schools, they cut the graduating classes of medical schools in the United States in half. Well, the elites in the profession, the legal profession, looked at it and said, we'll have what they're having, right? We'll do, we'll sort of follow that playbook. And they literally reach out to the American Medical Association, the foundation that conducted a study of medical schools and said, hey, how can we do the same thing for the legal profession, make it harder to go to law school, make law school more difficult to attend, more expensive to attend, and make it more difficult to get a law license? And they did all of those things, right? So maybe we could borrow again from what the medical profession does and has, a range of different professionals to provide appropriate services at appropriate times at a different cost point, to help people solve their legal problems. And here's the thing, right? Most Americans with legal problems, the first thing that comes to mind isn't, what I really need is a lawyer to solve my problem. First, they want their problem solved. And frankly, if we can do it in a less expensive way, in an effective way, in a way that solves that problem, then why shouldn't we be doing that? And if we're not doing that, as lawyers, only because we want to preserve our monopoly, we want to protect lawyer jobs, then we're in the wrong business, because the purpose of the profession is not to provide jobs for lawyers. The purpose of the profession is to help Americans solve their legal problems. And the bargain that has been struck, giving us a monopoly on the provision of legal services, is that we have to make sure that everyone who has a legal need can get it met.
This episode is sponsored by Candle AI, the legal email assistant that helps legal teams spend less time on client emails. You heard me right, spending less time on emails. Candle AI works with both Gmail and Outlook, so you don't have to learn a new tool. And then it connects with popular case management systems like Clio, Filevine, INSSoom, and more to come. It instantly shows you your case and the client details the moment you open a client email, and right inside your inbox. Then that means less context switching and time spent jumping to different tabs to figure out what you need to respond. Candle can also draft context-aware responses to client emails and makes it easy to create, edit, and manage your email templates. If you want to save time and take back control of your inbox, check out Candle AI. I highly suggest it.
Wow, a lot. I agree. I agree with you. And I think the question is that the people who agree with you, it's like, how do we get there? Because there's a lot of change and people generally don't like change, and it could impact livelihood. But then I think what a lot of things will point to is with disruptors, that more opportunities, change can equal opportunity. If you're in the right place at the right time and you have that open mindset, then you can help usher in helping those people who aren't getting helped and be there at the forefront of this new wave and this new change. So, I mean, what are some of the things you would say to people who are thinking like, how can I be ready? Because like how we met was we were talking about sort of like the pipeline about law students and lawyers and educators and what were our duty to help, usher in this newly minted attorneys. And then I'm just thinking like academia, love you, but like you move almost slower than the practice of law, and it's just like there's so much disruption going on in this space. Anyway, it's a lot to unpack here, so do whatever you want with it.
100%. So, some people have changed, some people embrace change, and some people have change thrust upon them, right? And I think we are seeing, I mean, how many times a day in the United States are people going to ChatGPT or other, generative AI tools or just simply Googling, legal questions? I mean, it's almost countless, right? And so, and we're seeing it reflected in court filings, by pro se litigants, self-represented litigants, and lawyers who are relying on these tools and doing it poorly and doing it to their detriment. Lawyers getting sanctioned, pro se litigants getting admonished and even sanctioned for relying on the output of generative AI that makes mistakes, all the time. And so, this is happening, right? And so trying to figure out how the legal profession can get ahead of the curve and not be behind it, I think is the challenge for the profession. And part of that is going to require that the profession is at the forefront of delivering low cost, accessible services, right, that meet people's needs, and doing so at scale, right? There's no question that there are times when a full service lawyer is what is needed, right? What we keep going back to Richard Susskind, right? what he calls bespoke legal services, right? When a lawyer sits down, client by client, puts together a tailored strategy and plan for addressing that person's legal problems. Sometimes that is absolutely what is needed. 100%. Facing a felony charge, facing any serious criminal charge, facing bet the company litigation, facing loss of a home or of healthcare benefits. Right? Like there are times when these issues are so serious and the risk of a lack of representation is so grave that there's no substitute for a lawyer operating at the height of their craft, providing individualized services for that person. But right, that's a nice to have, right? The reality is, as we said before, the overwhelming majority of low income and middle income Americans face their legal problems without assistance. Right now, we do have the right to counsel in criminal cases, right? In certain types of criminal cases. And we're starting to see the emergence of programming in certain jurisdictions where there's a right to counsel. Let's say if for low income people in an eviction case, we see that in New York City, right? And other cities. But the reality is, for civil legal problems, most low and middle income Americans don't have a lawyer to help them address them. So while it is it's difficult to say that people should only have a full service lawyer in every situation. Like, yes, you can say that, but the reality, and thus we can't allow other modes of service delivery into the tent. The reality is there are many people outside the tent who are getting nothing other than what they might be able to find out on their own through Google searches or through going to ChatGPT or other services. So, I'm the first to admit that there are instances where there's no substitute for a full service attorney, but far too many people are facing those instances without a full service attorney.
Right.
We've got to figure out a way to close that gap.
Well, I think one thing I realized a couple of years ago was that lawyers seem to have this mindset that we have to be from the A to Z, and we have to provide the whole thing. But when I did some more digging, like you can unbundle services if you're clear about it. I mean, sure, it depends on your jurisdiction and what you're doing. Okay, all that caveat, whatever. But like it is possible, and I think that's where, like, when I was writing my book, I was talking about, like, are you providing like Walmart services, Target, or Nordstrom? And let's say full service is Nordstrom, right? And like I want to be more like Target, so the Walmart people can maybe come up to Target, and the Nordstrom can afford the Target. But like I try to reach, I don't know, maybe it's optimistic, try to reach a lot of people. But like I've also been thinking, like, how could I unbundle my services and have more tiers? I talk to a lot of people who do other alternative billing, like subscription, or, I mean, I'm a flat fee space myself in my law practice, but like, there's lots of talk about like having courses with like a small add-on, or having, being creative and trying to, because you're talking about scale. And like, I think people are like, how can I do that? And I think you have to leverage the technology, and, how, I don't know that. I see one of the things you were mentioning was lawyers who run with the machines. And what, I've never really heard that expression before, but I love it. So why don't you explain what it is and what you're thinking when you say that?
Sure. So I love that expression, but in chess tournaments, right? We know that computers can beat grandmasters in chess, but there are these teams that are put together that are called centaurs. Human horse hybrids, right? So from Harry Potter and mythology, right? Depending on your source. And so teams that are a combination of computers and chess masters playing together tend to do better sometimes than grandmasters or computers alone. So there's that combination, that human in the loop, where the human intuition and inspiration is aided by the computer, and that's the running with the machines. And so, for example, there's a great program out there called Citizenship Works, and it's a web-based portal for people to transition from lawful permanent resident status to citizenship if they qualify, right? Think TurboTax, right? It's TurboTax for application to citizenship, right? They answer a series of questions, and throughout the system is checking. This is all automated. The system is checking, or there's some red flags, or there's some issues here that might end up with the applicant being rejected, or there's some concerns that the applicant doesn't have a relatively straightforward application, and sort of checking all along to say, okay, does this person match the product, as opposed to does the lawyer provide and tailor a product for the client in front of them. So we have, the traditional model is we sit down with the client and we match them to our services we want to provide, right? I think one of the things that we will do in the future is develop products and then screen the client for whether they match the product. So once you develop that product, you're then screening the client for whether they match the product. And that may satisfy a significant number of clients, right? It might be a simple contract. It might be a simple lease. It might be, a simple will. Given the complexity of your estate, given the complexity of your situation, do you match our, simple, straightforward, plain vanilla product, right? And that may take professional judgment to assess the person. It might take a conversation with the client, or filling out a simple questionnaire, right? And then if the person meets the product, you can say, this looks like you meet this product. You can have a low cost service, right? Here are the benefits and risks of using this product. One of them being, it's going to be less expensive than full service representation, but this may be good enough for you. And you may say, okay, this product cost me $1,000. Working with a lawyer may cost me $10,000. I think I can go with the good enough, right? But the judgment, instead of the judgment being the lawyer sort of sitting back and stroking their chin saying, well, I think that, here's the game plan for you. And it's more, okay, here's the game plan. Do you match the game plan? And if you don't match the game plan, then we move towards a different tier of service, right? But the client, it's transparent. The client, you have a conversation with the client, or even just you fill out the questionnaire online to see if you match. Do you have any of the red flags? So that's one, approach, which is, reversing that triage, right? Are we triaging clients? Or are we triaging products? And I think that maybe one strategy is to do the latter.
Wow. I really love that analogy, and just I always get close to thinking of something I could do with my own firm, and then I sort of get distracted, and I don't go forward. But I'm like, I think the time has come. I feel like this interview and your book coming out is a sign that I've really got to reimagine how to provide the different products out there for my clients, because there is so much need, and we're not meeting it. One of the things that, as an adjunct professor, and I'm really concerned, and an employer, just sort of like what's going on in the law education right now. So what would you suggest, since you've been in this space for longer in academia and practice as well, about how law students and young attorneys should be building resilience for these coming changes that we're seeing so much intensely right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. Something I think about a lot. It's interesting, I think we should be thinking about this concept called reverse mentoring, right?
Mm,
So in the law, we do a lot of traditional mentoring, experienced attorneys, mentoring, advising, guiding, supervising more junior lawyers, newer lawyers. I think with technology, with the advent of new technologies, I think we're gonna reverse the polarity, if you would. That for some, in some instances, we're gonna see the newer lawyers, digital natives who are more comfortable with technology, presenting information, presenting strategies, presenting techniques for when the newer lawyer can advise the more senior lawyer, hey, there's a technological tool here
mm,
that might be able to allow us to do the work a little more efficiently, a little more effectively. So that's one thing. I think experimentation, and that's not something that lawyers are super comfortable with, right? Like there's going to be some experimentation. There's going to you're going to fail, and maybe through simulations, not failing with respect to representing clients. I love when we get these reports out that this latest version of some generative AI tool is 95% accurate. Well, that's great. If a lawyer is 95% accurate, that means 1 out of 20 clients is going to sue them for malpractice. So we can't get by with 95% accuracy in our work. But so I think that we need to experiment a little bit. We need that reverse mentoring. We need more interdisciplinary collaboration. The IT
mm,
department is going to be integral to lawyers' teams, right? It's not going to be somebody you call when your computer isn't putting up or you can't figure out how to get the Zoom working. They're going to be shadowing the lawyers. They're going to be working with the lawyers. They're going to be the lawyers are going to be educating the IT people on what they do, how they do it, and IT people are going to be coming back saying, well, there's a solution. They're going to be researching those solutions, but they have to be better integrated into the work of the lawyer to understand how they operate, what their values are, what they're trying to accomplish. I did a demo with a technologist in the Gen AI space recently, and they demonstrated something with Gen AI, and they produced this great 3-page single space letter that was pretty good, right? You'd have about an issue, and you'd have to review it, you'd have to proofread it, right? Like you had to check the sources and all that stuff. And my next question was, okay, so we've done this for Mary Smith. Now can we do this for John Jones, where after I've proofread it, after I've checked everything, it just plugs in the names and changes the facts where appropriate. And like with the technologist, it was like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I don't want to have to proofread this 3-page single space letter every time. I want to know that this is good, it's packaged, it's ready to go, and I'm just
mhm.
changing a few things. And it was almost like, I'm a 80s kid, right? It was almost like on Spinal Tap, right? Where it's like, but 11, it was like they didn't compute for the technologist. It was like, but you can do a whole new letter. It's like, yeah, but lawyers don't want to do that, right? We don't want to recreate the wheel. So we have to educate the technologists too on how we operate. Like we don't want to spend an hour proofreading a new single space letter every time. We want to make sure we can just plug in the things that will change. So I think there's got to be that reverse mentoring. We've got to work, experiment, and we've got to bring the technologists, do a lot more interdisciplinary work than we're doing today.
What do you think is going to be the typical day in the life of a lawyer 3.0 in the future?
Well, I don't think there is a lawyer 3.0. I think there are legal professionals in the lawyer 3.0 space, and whether that's a technologist who does who advises lawyers, whether that's a what we would call today a paralegal or a legal technician who handles a lot of day-to-day work for clients. There's the full service lawyer. There's the lawyer who's educating the technologist. So I don't think there's one lawyer in Lawyer 3.0. I don't know if that means it's Lawyer 3.1, 3.2, 3.2, 3.3, but I think that there are a lot of professionals within the umbrella of the profession that provides legal assistance and helps people solve their problems.
What was one of the things that surprised you the most when you were researching and writing this book?
That we've been here before, right?
Uh-huh.
That this isn't the first time that lawyers have had to adapt to new technologies. But I think that we've messed it up before, right? And one of the, when the changes I talked about, the turn of the 19th, 20th century, lawyers were learning how to incorporate the telephone, the telegraph, the typewriter, the ability to reproduce legal opinions quickly and easily. Like, that was one of the drivers of the change, to create law firms that could that could incorporate, that could assimilate these technologies. And when I started in 1992, I had colleagues who still wrote things out longhand, right? I think that we've been here before. I think we've taken turns that privilege the monopoly. I think this time is different because the technologies are going to be democratized. And if the technologies are democratized, for better or worse, in some ways, the law is going to be democratized. And again, for better or worse, because it's going to mean that people are relying on some of these tools to their detriment. And if we as lawyers have an obligation to ensure, the rule of law, that the legal system functions the way it should, then we have an obligation to get out in front of these changes.
Oh, I love it. This is a great message. I'm really excited to have you on our podcast, and we'll definitely get this message out.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by all the different things you have to do to run a law firm? Well, you're not alone. So many law firm owners are in the same boat. That's where Staffy steps in. More than 90 firms, just like yours, are leaning on their bilingual virtual staff for legal, administrative, marketing, and client-facing work, plus their full HR support. I currently have 11 team members with Staffy across my own firm and Power Strategy Group, and it's been a total game changer. Schedule a free initial consultation at staffy.cc, that's stafi.cc, and use the code RUBY, RUBY, for $500 off.
My fun fact questions is, what's your favorite board game? I'll
Risk.
be fast. All right. You have a lot of time to go. It's like a whole lot.
No, it's a long game. I play it like once a year with some family friends. Like we sit down and it can go,
forever.
For days.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. What would you consider your superpower?
I don't know that I have one, but I work as if I do. And it may be just that work, if you believe it, maybe you can will it into existence or something.
Love it. Okay. What would you consider a habit that's contributed to your success?
I think trying to be inquisitive, trying to be curious, but also, knowing that sometimes you got to step away from the work. Sometimes you've got to, go for a run. You've got to, I sometimes, I play electric bass, and sometimes the ideas come to me when I'm doing those other things. So you've got to step away, let the juices flow, and sometimes things come to you.
I agree. What's a favorite book or podcast you'd like to recommend to listeners?
Well, if a little shameless self-promotion plug, I'm also on the Legal AF podcast, so people can follow me there. But a favorite book, I think, something that really captured what I think the moment we're in now is Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead. But I just started reading a book called Paper Girl by Beth Macy, and oh my God, it's nonfiction. It's like the nonfiction. She's the author of Dope Sick. It's like the nonfiction version of Demon Copperhead, and it's blowing me away. There's some great stuff out there.
Well, definitely, I'll have to check it out. How can people find you and stay in touch?
Well, you can find me. I'm on Instagram at Prof. Ray Brescia, Brescia. I'm on LinkedIn like everybody else. I'm on the Legal AF network. So there's lots of different ways to connect.
Well, thank you, Ray, for joining us today. And everyone, again, his latest book is Lawyer 3.0, A Guide to Next Wave Lawyering. Lots to unpack, a lot of great themes that are all coming together. Highly recommend. And, I'm glad we had this conversation and look forward to collaborating in the future.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Power Up Your Practice. I'm Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. We love your reviews, so if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us one and share this podcast with someone else so that they can know what you've been learning on our show. And make sure to check out the Power Up Your Practice book. It's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon. It's packed with 25 chapters of strategies to grow and streamline your firm. And we also have the free Power Hub community on School to keep the conversation going in between the episodes. So make sure to keep powering up your practice, and we'll see you next time.